The letter trembled in Sarah's hands as she read. The words that would destroy everything: immediate compliance required or face $500 daily fines. 3 months after removing her pool to save her marriage, the HOA was demanding she restore the aesthetic water feature that had nearly killed her daughter. But when Sarah discovered who was really behind the harassment, she realized this wasn't about landscaping it was about revenge. And some people were willing to lose everything to get it. Sarah Chen stared at the certified letter in her driveway, her coffee growing cold in the October morning air. The Willowbrook Estates HOA seal gleamed like a fresh wound across the envelope's corner. She'd been expecting this, dreading it. Really, ever since old Mrs. Patterson had started taking her evening walks past Sarah's house with that smartphone raised like a weapon? "Mom?" Lily's voice drifted from the front door, small and uncertain. "Is everything okay?" Sarah forced a smile and tucked the letter into her jacket pocket. "Just neighborhood stuff, sweetheart. Go finish your breakfast." But as Lily's footsteps retreated into the house, Sarah's composure cracked. She ripped open the envelope with shaking fingers, though she already knew what it would say. The words blurred together at first violation. Aesthetic standards. Immediate compliance until one phrase snapped into sharp focus. The removal of the decorative water feature has resulted in an unsightly dry zone that violates Section 12.3 of the Community Charter. Daily fines of $500 will commence if the pool is not restored within 30 days. Sarah let out a bitter laugh that caught in her throat. They made it sound like she'd torn out a fountain, not the 20,000-gallon death trap that had nearly claimed her 8-year-old daughter's life 3 months ago. The memory hit her like it always did, sudden and merciless. Lily floating, face down in the deep end during Emma Richardson's birthday party. The terrible silence before the screaming started. The paramedics' grim faces as they worked. The endless hours in the hospital, praying her daughter would wake up without brain damage. "Decorative," she whispered, crumpling the letter. Right, her phone buzzed. A text from her ex-husband David got the same letter. "We need to talk." Sarah's jaw tightened. Of course, he'd gotten one too. His name was still on the deed, even though he'd moved out the day after Lily came home from the hospital. "Too much stress," he'd said. "Need some space to process." Translation: he couldn't handle watching his daughter relearn how to walk without feeling guilty about the pool. He'd insisted they install Dot. She was shoving the phone back in her pocket when another text arrived. "Can you meet at Riverside Park? 10 a.m., please." Dot please undid her. David Chen didn't beg. In their 12 years of marriage, she'd heard him say please maybe a dozen times, and half of those had been in the bedroom. This wasn't about the HOA letter. This was about something worse. Riverside Park sat nearly empty on the Tuesday morning, just a few joggers and dog walkers scattered across the sprawling grounds. Sarah spotted David immediately. He was sitting on their old bench, the one where he'd proposed 6 years ago, but he looked like a stranger. His usually perfect hair hung limp, his expensive suit wrinkled. He'd lost weight, and not in a good way. "You look terrible," she said, settling beside him, but keeping distance between them. "Thanks." You look ... He studied her face, taking in the dark circles under her eyes, the sharp angles where stress had carved away her softness. "Tired? I am tired. I'm tired of fielding calls from the insurance company. I'm tired of driving Lily to physical therapy 3 times a week. I'm tired of pretending this is all normal." She pulled out the crumpled letter. "And now, I'm tired of this bullshit." David glanced at the HOA notice and winced. "That's actually why I asked you here. I need to tell you something about the letter, about why we're getting it now." Something in his tone made Sarah's stomach drop. "What do you mean? The HOA didn't send these on their own. Someone requested an official review of our property." David's hands twisted in his lap. "Someone filed a formal complaint. Who, Sarah? Who?" David met her eyes for the first time since she'd sat down. "Melissa Richardson." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Melissa Richardson, Emma's mother, the woman who'd stood in Sarah's hospital waiting room 3 months ago, wringing her hands and apologizing over and over until Sarah had finally snapped and told her to go home. "Why?" Sarah's voice came out strangled. "Why would she do this?" "Because Emma's been having nightmares. Because she blames herself for not helping Lily. Because Melissa thinks if we put the pool back, Emma will see that everything's normal again, and the nightmares will stop." David ran his hands through his hair. She called me last week. She's desperate, Sarah. Emma's been in therapy since the accident. So has Lily. I know, but what? Emma wasn't the one who nearly died. Sarah shot to her feet, pacing in front of the bench. Emma wasn't the one who spent 4 days in intensive care. Emma doesn't wake up screaming about drowning. Melissa thinks. I don't give a damn what Melissa thinks. The words came out louder than Sarah intended, drawing stares from a nearby jogger. She lowered her voice but couldn't contain the fury. We removed that pool to protect our daughter, to protect all the kids who play in our yard. And now she wants us to put it back because her kid feels guilty. David stood too, reaching for her arm. Sarah, listen. Melissa's willing to pay for everything. The pool, the landscaping, the fines, everything. Sarah jerked away from his touch. This isn't about money. I know, but no, you don't know. The words exploded out of her. You don't know because you weren't there. You weren't there when I pulled our daughter out of that water. You weren't there when the doctors said she might never be the same. You weren't there for any of it because the second things got hard. You ran. David's face went pale. That's not fair. Sarah laughed, high and bitter. You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what's not fair. What's not fair is getting a letter threatening to fine us $500 a day for making the responsible choice as parents. Is having the mother of the child who was playing in our yard when our daughter nearly died turn around and try to force us to reinstall the thing that almost killed her. What's not fair is my husband abandoning his family when we needed him most and then showing up 3 months later to tell me we should cave to the demands of a woman who's more worried about her kid's therapy bills than our kid's life. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the rustle of autumn leaves. David's shoulders sagged as if all the fight had gone out of him. She's threatening to sue us, he said quietly. Melissa, if we don't comply with the HOA order, she's going to sue us for creating an attractive nuisance and then removing it without proper notification to affected parties. Sarah felt the world tilt. What does that even mean? It means she's claiming that by installing the pool, we created a legal obligation to maintain it for the benefit of the neighborhood children. And by removing it without warning, we've caused psychological damage to Emma. David's voice was hollow. Her lawyer thinks she has a case. Her lawyer? Sarah sank back onto the bench. The fight suddenly drained out of her. Of course she has a lawyer. It gets worse. David sat beside her, careful not to touch. I talked to our insurance company yesterday. They're not going to cover a lawsuit like this. It falls outside our homeowners policy. The implications crashed over Sarah like a wave. A lawsuit would mean legal fees they couldn't afford. It would mean depositions and court appearances and having Lily's accident dissected by strangers. It would mean years of fighting, years of reliving the worst day of their lives over and over again. How much? She asked. Maybe more if it goes to trial. And to comply with the HOA pool installation, landscaping, fines, ... David calculated in his head, $45,000, give or take. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think, but her mind felt like static. They didn't have $45,000. They definitely didn't have $50,000. David's construction business had been struggling even before he moved out, and Sarah's job at the medical clinic barely covered their monthly expenses. They were already behind on the mortgage since David left. There's something else, said Melissa's husband works for the city planning department. Sarah opened her eyes. So he's the one who reviews HOA compliance issues. He's the one who determines if fines are justified. David met her gaze. This whole thing, not just about Emma's nightmares. They've got us boxed in from every angle. The full scope of the trap began to dawn on Sarah. The Richardsons hadn't just filed a complaint, they'd orchestrated a campaign. Melissa with her lawsuit threat, her husband with his position of power, and the HOA as their weapon of choice. It was elegant in its cruelty. They planned this, Sarah said. Looks like it. They want us to put the pool back so badly they're willing to destroy us financially if we don't. Yeah, Sarah stood up slowly, feeling older than her 34 years. The morning sun that had seemed so bright when she'd arrived now felt harsh and unforgiving. Everything about this day, this conversation, this whole nightmare, felt surreal. I need to pee. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. David's words echoed in her mind as she sat in the school pickup line, watching other parents chat casually while their biggest worry was probably what to make for dinner. I don't think Emma Richardson is the only child Melissa's worried about. What did that mean? And why did David look like he'd uncovered something that made him sick? Her phone buzzed with a text. "Meet me at Starbucks on Maple. After you get Lily, I'll show you what I found." 20 minutes later, Sarah watched Lily skip toward her classroom, backpack bouncing. Physical therapy forgotten in the excitement of an early dismissal. At least one of them could still find joy in small things. "Mom, why do you look mad?" Lily had asked during the drive. "I'm not mad, sweetheart. Just thinking about the pool thing. I heard you and Daddy talking on the phone yesterday about people wanting us to put the pool back." Lily's voice got smaller. "I don't want the pool back, Mom. It was scary." "I know, baby. We're not putting it back. Promise." Sarah had looked in the rearview mirror at her daughter's earnest face, still too thin from the hospital stay, but alive and bright and trusting aunt made a vow that crystallized everything. "I promise." Now, sitting across from David in the crowded coffee shop, Sarah braced herself for whatever bombshell he was about to drop. "Okay," she said. "Talk." David opened his laptop and angled the screen toward her. "Remember how I said I'd been digging? Well, I started with public records. Property sales, HOA violations, that kind of thing. The screen showed a spreadsheet with addresses, dates, and violation codes. Sarah squinted at the data. "I don't understand what I'm looking at." "These are all the HOA violations in Willowbrook Estates over the past 5 years. David's finger traced down the columns. "Look at the pattern." Sarah studied the entries more carefully. Most violations were standard stuff lawn maintenance, exterior paint approval, fence height issues. But starting 18 months ago, there was a cluster of violations that stood out. Unauthorized pool removal. 3 families, David said quietly, all with young children, all forced to either install expensive safety upgrades or remove their pools entirely. So, maybe the HOA got more serious about pool safety after some incident. That's what I thought too, until I found this. David clicked to another tab, revealing a local news article from 2 years ago. The headline made Sarah's blood run cold. "Local child hospitalized after near drowning at neighborhood party." Sarah read quickly. A 6-year-old boy named Marcus Webb had nearly drowned at a birthday party in Willowbrook Estates. He'd survived, but with significant brain damage. The article mentioned that the party had been at the Richardson residence. "Jesus," Sarah whispered. "It gets worse." David scrolled down to the comments section beneath the article. Most were the usual mix of sympathy and blame, but one stood out. Posted by a user named Melissa47. "This is exactly why we need stricter pool regulations in our community. Too many families treat swimming pools like toys instead of the dangerous water hazards they really are. I've contacted the HOA about implementing immediate safety reviews for all pool-owning residents." Sarah stared at the comment. Horrible puzzle clicking into place. She's been targeting families with pools since Marcus Webb's accident. Not just targeting systematically, forcing them out. David pulled up another document. "I found the Webb family's property records. They sold their house 8 months after the accident and moved across town. Same with the Kowalskis, and the Patel family both had pools. Both got hit with massive HOA fines for safety violations. Both ended up selling. But why? What does Melissa gain from driving out families with pools?" David's expression darkened. "I think she's trying to eliminate all the pools in the neighborhood. Create some kind of water hazard-free zone where she doesn't have to worry about another accident happening." Sarah felt sick. By destroying people's lives. "There's more." David clicked to another tab, revealing what looked like real estate listings. Sarah leaned forward and read the name at the bottom of each listing. Richardson Realty, Melissa Richardson. Licensed agent. The coffee shop suddenly felt too hot, too loud, too crowded. Sarah pushed back from the table, her mind reeling. She's been forcing families to sell so she can profit from their misery. It looks that way. And here's the kicker. Every house she listed was sold to families without young children. Retirees mostly, or young professionals without kids. She's engineering a demographic shift. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. getting rid of all the families with children who might use pools. David closed the laptop, but we removed it ourselves before she could force us out through violations. So now she's trying a different approach. Sarah thought about Emma Richardson, supposedly plagued by nightmares and guilt. Had any of that been true? Or was Emma just another pawn in her mother's larger scheme? We need to talk to the other families, Sarah said. The ones who were forced out, I already did. I reached out to Beth Kowalski yesterday. David's jaw tightened. Sarah, what Melissa did to them, ... it was brutal. Hundreds of safety violations, each one carrying daily fines. Beth said they were getting hit with $1,500 a day by the end. How is that legal? Because her husband sits on the city planning board. He rubber stamps everything the HOA requests. David leaned forward. But here's the thing, Beth said something interesting. She said that right before the violations started, Melissa approached them directly, offered to buy their house for cash, 20% below market value. When they refused, the violations started the next week. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down and felt her blood turn to ice. Hi, Sarah. This is Melissa Richardson. I was hoping we could meet and discuss this like reasonable adults. I think you'll find I'm prepared to be very generous to help resolve this matter. Would tomorrow at 2 p.m. work? I can come to your house? Melissa, she wants to meet, Sarah said, showing David the text. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock at our house. Sarah stared at the message, anger building in her chest like pressure in a steam kettle. She's going to try to buy us off, or threaten us. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another text from Melissa. I should mention that I've spoken with several other neighbors who are concerned about the precedent set by unauthorized pool removal. I'd hate for this to become a larger community issue. Reading over Sarah's shoulder, the threat, Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Several other customers looked over, but she didn't care. The rage that had been simmering all morning was finally boiling over. I need to get out of here, she said. Sarah, wait. We need to plan. Plan what? We know what she's doing. We know why she's doing it, and we know she's going to keep doing it until we give in or she destroys us. Sarah grabbed her purse, her movements sharp and angry. I'm done being her victim. David followed her out of the coffee shop, catching up to her. In the parking lot, what are you going to do? Sarah turned to face him, and for a moment, he looked almost afraid of the expression on her face. I'm going to that meeting tomorrow, and I'm going to tell Melissa Richardson exactly what I think of her and her fucking real estate empire. That's not a plan, that's suicide. She's got lawyers, Sarah. She's got connections. She's got our daughter's blood on her hands. The words came out like a scream, raw and primal. She hosted the party where Marcus Webb nearly died, and instead of taking responsibility, instead of making sure it never happened again, she decided to profit from it. She's been using that boy's suffering to terrorize other families for 2 years. Sarah was breathing hard, her whole body shaking with fury. A few people in the parking lot were staring, but she was past caring about appearances. And now, she continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, she wants to force us to put back the pool that nearly killed our daughter so her precious Emma can sleep better at night. Well, guess what? I don't give a damn about Emma's nightmares. I care about keeping my daughter alive. David stepped closer, his voice urgent. Sarah, I get it. I'm angry too. But if you go into that meeting tomorrow looking for a fight, she's going to crush you. She's been planning this for months. You think she doesn't have a strategy for dealing with angry parents? Then what do you suggest? We document everything. We get statements from the other families. We build a case that shows what she's really doing and take it to someone who can stop her. Who? Her husband controls the city planning office. The HOA is already in her pocket. The police aren't going to care about civil disputes. The power, David, we're just the latest family she's decided to destroy. David was quiet for a long moment, staring across the parking lot at the steady stream of afternoon traffic. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, harder, more determined than she'd heard it in months. Not all the power, he said. There's one thing she doesn't have. Part 3. Sarah stood at her kitchen window at 1:45 p.m., watching the street like a sniper waiting for her target. She'd been awake since 4 a.m., her mind racing through every possible scenario. Spotless not because she cared about impressing her visitor, but because she needed something to do with her hands while she planned. Lily was at her friend Madison's house, safely away from whatever was about to unfold. Sarah had agonized over that decision. But David was right. This meeting was going to be a war zone, and their daughter had been through enough trauma. Sure, you want to do this alone? David had asked that morning when he dropped off the file folder containing everything they'd discovered about Melissa's real estate schemes. I need to handle this myself, Sarah had replied, looking like she'd stepped out of a real estate brochure, perfectly styled blonde hair, designer suit, smile that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly grocery budget. But it was the small figure climbing out of the passenger seat that made dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she clutched a stuffed animal, a dolphin, against her chest like a shield. Sarah opened the front door before they could knock. Sarah, Melissa's voice was bright and warm, as if they were old friends meeting for coffee. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet. I think we're going to find a solution that works for everyone. I'm sure we will, Sarah replied, her own voice carefully neutral. Come in. Emma hung back as they entered the living room, her eyes darting around like she was looking for escape routes. Sarah's maternal instincts warred with her anger. This child was clearly suffering. But that didn't change what her mother had done. Emma, sweetheart, why don't you have a seat on the couch? Melissa guided her daughter to the sofa, then settled beside her with practiced ease. Sarah, I have to say, your home is lovely. I can see why you're so attached to it. Oh, that's very kind, but we won't be staying long. Melissa opened her purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I thought it would be better to get straight to business. Before we start, Sarah said, I'm curious about something. Emma, how are you doing, sweetheart? Emma's eyes widened, and she looked at her mother before answering. I'm okay. Your mom mentioned you've been having nightmares about what happened in our backyard. Emma's been struggling, Melissa interjected quickly. The therapist thinks that seeing the pool area restored might help her process. I was asking Emma, Sarah said firmly. Emma, do you have nightmares about Lily's accident? The little girl's eyes filled with tears. Sometimes, she whispered, but not about the pool. Melissa's perfect smile flickered. Sweetheart, remember what Dr. Martinez said about how the pool represents, I dream about the other boy, Emma said suddenly, her voice barely audible. The one at our house, Marcus. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah watched Melissa's face go pale, her carefully constructed composure cracking like thin ice. Emma, we're not here to talk about that, Melissa said, her voice sharp with panic. But Emma was looking at Sarah now, tears streaming down her face. I dream about Marcus because I know what really happened. I know why he fell in the pool, and I know why Mommy doesn't want anyone to talk about it. Emma, stop. Melissa's voice was a whip crack, but her daughter didn't obey. Marcus couldn't swim very well, Emma continued, the words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. Inside drinking wine and laughing, and we were outside by ourselves. Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. How many children were outside alone? 8 of us, and Marcus was the littlest. Emma's voice broke. I tried to help him, but I was too small. I screamed and screamed, but nobody heard me because the music was too loud. That's enough. Melissa lunged forward, grabbing Emma's arm. We're leaving now. But Emma wrenched away from her mother's grip, something fierce and desperate in her young face. Tired of you using me to hurt other people? Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't what she'd expected, but she recognized the moment for what it was, a child's desperate cry for truth in a world of adult lies. I'm sad about pools being taken away, but I'm not. But she says we have to make people put them back, because it's good for business. Melissa stood abruptly, her face flushed with rage and panic. You manipulative bitch. You planned this. You deliberately upset my daughter to get information. I asked her a simple question, Sarah replied calmly, though her heart was racing. She's the one who chose to tell the truth. The truth. Melissa's laugh was bitter. You want the truth? Fine. Yes. I've been working to eliminate pools in this neighborhood. Yes, I've used my position to make it happen. Innocent families, by making hard choices that soft people like you are too weak to make. Melissa's composure was completely gone now, her voice shrill with fury. You think you're protecting your daughter? You're being selfish. Every pool in this neighborhood is a potential death trap, and I'm the only one with the courage to do something about it. Sarah stood slowly, her own anger building like a gathering storm. You want to talk about courage? Let's talk about the courage it takes to pull your drowning child out of a pool. Let's talk about the courage it takes to make the hard choice to remove something dangerous from your property. Let's talk about the courage it takes to fight for your family when people like you try to destroy them. I'm trying to save children's lives. No, you're trying to save your own ass. Sarah's voice rose to match Melissa's. You're terrified that someone's going to figure out that Marcus Webb's accident happened because you were too busy getting drunk with your friends to supervise 8 children around a swimming pool. So you've spent 2 years systematically destroying every other family in this neighborhood to make sure you never have to face the consequences of your own failures as a mother. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Sarah pulled out the folder David had given her. I know about the Webb family. I know about the Kowalskis and the Patels. I know about every family you've driven out of this neighborhood through harassment and intimidation. I know about your real estate commissions and your husband's position on the planning board. I know about all of it, Melissa. You can't prove anything. I can prove enough. Sarah's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. And if you don't withdraw your complaint against us immediately, I'm going to make sure everyone in this neighborhood knows exactly what kind of person you really are. Melissa grabbed Emma's hand, yanking the crying child toward the door. This isn't over. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Up her own guilt that she's willing to sacrifice other people's children to protect herself. I'm dealing with a monster who hides behind her own daughter's trauma to justify her cruelty. Melissa spun around in the doorway, her face twisted with rage. You want to play hardball? Fine. By the end of the week, you'll be facing lawsuits that will take everything you have. Your house, your savings, your daughter's college fund, all of it. And when you're living in a studio apartment and working 3 jobs to pay your legal bills, remember that you brought this on yourself. Maybe, Sarah said, but at least I'll still be able to look at myself in the mirror. Can you say the same? After they left, Sarah sank into her chair, adrenaline and exhaustion warring in her system. Sat in her quiet living room, thinking about Emma's tears and Marcus Webb's broken life and all the families who'd been driven from their homes. She wasn't fighting just for Lily anymore. She was fighting for every child who'd been failed by the adults who were supposed to protect them. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. How did it go? Sarah looked around her living room. The home she might lose, the life she might